Forgot to hit the button. All right, guys, welcome to the Church Split. My name is Will, and welcome to the Wednesday night live stream where something is bound to always go wrong. Either I'm going to have my mic muted or I'm going to forget to add to stage when I come on the channel. Whatever, it's fine. So hope everyone's doing good. Now, for those who are regular viewers of this channel, you might notice that today is a bit different than normal. I've been normally doing my atonement studies or things like that, or like last week I talked about why I didn't convert to Eastern Orthodoxy. This week I'm trying something different. I'm going to try to do my theology of the body and finish it out in the next week or two on live. And that's because the live audience tends to actually bring my core audience, and then my normal videos kind of get scattered everywhere and there's like really no focus to it. So I'm going to try to keep my videos as shorter videos, and then on my lives tab do all the nerdy stuff that the nerds and the core channel people care about. We're going to see how that goes for algorithm's sake. So anyhow, so for all people who are interested in this is going to be the next portion of my Theology of the Body series. Now, this is probably going to be, wait, what is this? What is it? Okay, starting pool on how long it'll take. Will ends up talking on mute, 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I'll be generous to Will and say 20 minutes. Joke's on you guys. Today I don't have to play a video, so I don't have to worry about muting my mic. So guess what that means? I don't even have to hit the button. So y'all suck. All right. This time I get to actually do okay. But today we're going to talk about marriage, and we're also going to talk about the prohibition of same-sex marriage. But before we talk about the prohibition of same-sex same-sex attraction with same-sex relationships, I want to make sure we have a well-defined understanding of what marriage actually is. And we're talking about what marriage actually is. It's actually really important in general because that's a theological meaning that I touched on my previous episode on this very topic. So I would go check that out if you haven't seen it already. But it's not. So what we need to understand is that marriage isn't just a covenant to two people. One of the biggest issues now is of how we define marriage in our culture is two people love each other, they make a promise, aka a covenant with one another, and that's what all it is. Two people who love each other. That's all marriage is. Well, now of course we're seeing multiple people in marriage happening. Like, was it in Thailand? I think I saw like 3 dudes get married together. And the point is that true marriage is not anything that is same sex. True marriage is one man and one woman. And we're going to look at that today and talk about why that is and why that has always been historically. So Nathan says, okay, you win this time. So yeah, tonight's live stream won't be controversial at all. I'm actually wondering what YouTube's going to do with it due to my thumbnail. But I chose to be saucy with the thumbnail just to see what would happen. So, all right. So first off, is more when we're talking about marriage, we need to understand it's more than just a covenant or a life pledge with someone of the opposite, of the opposite sex. It is actually that sexual difference reflects God's creation. It reflects a lot of things there, and also it is there's other reasons for marriage than just two people who love each other. In fact, people understood the first century world that even Jesus was living in. You will run into some very different view of marriage than what we'd have nowadays. So marriage is a covenant, life pledge with someone of the opposite sex for the purpose of relationship, bearing children, and strengthening your community. The very first institution God ever created was marriage. And so when he did that, he created Adam and Eve, right? He created man and woman for that purpose. And it's not just so two people can love each other. It's also to bear children. It's also to build a community. So Dr. Preston Sprinkle, by the way, said this. He said, marriage is a lifelong one flesh covenant union between two sexually different persons, a male and female, from different families, united with the purpose of telling God's story of faithfulness and creativity, and sexual relationships outside of this covenant union are a sin. And so a lot of people, like, I've noticed that Preston Sprinkle is like a controversial figure amongst conservative evangelicals because he's too quote unquote side B for them. He's not affirming, but he's like, he'll rub shoulders more politely and kindly with people of the LGBTQ community. I don't mind his approach, except for the fact that he does practice pronoun hospitality. I think that's where his side B comes in. But when it comes to like marriage and sexuality, a lot of people, I don't know if they know this, but that's like what his entire doctoral like study was on like this particular topics of marriage and sexuality. So he actually has some really good information on this. But anyway, this marriage though reflects the perfect ideological union. It is masculine and feminine together. So this thing that happens, it is the idea is bringing two opposite but same things, a male and female, together for an ideological union. And that means all the traits of femininity and masculinity are coming together and one to reflect the union of God's perfect creation. Just as God is the one who creates and he's in union with us, so too does man and woman show union with one another. They're two different but same things. We are created in the image of God, after all. And so if he is the image that we are made after, that should tell you a little bit about how we thread that needle between them. It is a reflection of a union between the two. So it's reflected in in the way our bodies are even built and the purpose by which we are oriented. Male and female bodies are built with very obvious purposes in mind. I talked about this in other episodes, but it's really important that we understand that. You put a male body and a female body next to each other and they make sense. You see what they were designed to do. You see that the woman was essentially made for life giving and life bearing and nurturing. And the man is meant primarily for not just like giving the seed in that sense, but also to build, protect, and do all the things that the masculine body is intended to do. She's meant to be taking care of, primarily, she's designed to take care of internal needs. And a lot of things, men would take care of external needs. So in the first century, women were considered the managers of the house, and that there was no other, even they're in a patriarchal society, there's no one that the men would trust more with the management of their house, nor should back then, than their wives, which is pretty powerful stuff. And she was considered the manager of the home, but the men were the ones who were supposed to work the fields. If the men did not work the fields, it was considered shameful for a man. Actually, if a man was something like what we would call a man of the tent, so to speak, it was actually considered less honorable than a man of the fields. So, oh, what's up, guys? Okay, Jeffrey, I'm at work, so I may pop in and out. And what's up? What's up, guys? By the way, you notice that less people are watching because it's not as controversial as my other videos. I find that funny, even though it's like culturally more controversial. But you can tell what my core audience is. My core audience are Christians, so they're like, oh, we already know this, so they're. But I still think it's important information that might not be known by all Christians. Anyway, Genesis 2, 23 through 25, of course, is a very popular passage. It says, then the man said, this is at last bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of a man. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. Now, this, of course, is controversial nowadays because there's a whole idea that like sex isn't even needed in marriage. Like, oh, well, why does the husband expect that from her? Or why does she expect? And it's like, because they become one flesh. That's part of it. That's the marital act that seals the deal. They could sign the marital contract. They could do all the things. But if that act, the actual act of sex, unless there's a health issue, did not take place, it was actually not considered a sealed marriage. It's not considered actually finalized. One could even consider something like what some people would consider baptism, right? The baptism is essentially the seal or the thing that confirms the very promises and the fealty that you made up to that point. So anyway, leaving one's parents, this is part of marriage. So as we're talking about what is marriage, we have to define it. It's a male and female, so opposite sex, together in a covenantal union for the purpose of life giving, life bearing, and of course, giving to the community. But leaving one's parents is the purpose for this is to branch off from the family to begin one's own family. So often people discuss that marriage is just two people who love each other, but that's not true regarding the historical purpose of marriage. It involves wanting to start a family and strengthen one's community, but breaking off and beginning your own home to strengthen the community and raise up the next generation. That's why it says be fruitful and multiply. This is why like I used to have this whole thing of like, oh, you could choose to have kids or not, but I actually have kind of changed my view where I'm like, every time it talks about marriage, it seems like it talks about the purpose of at least trying or at least being willing to have kids. And now obviously if you're infertile or whatever, you have those issues, that's not a sin. But to outright reject the purpose of your marriage, of one of the purposes of your marriage, which is to be fruitful and multiply, seems to be against the marital, like the marital mission, part one of the marital mission. It's not the only marital mission, but I hope you get my point there. So it involves wanting to start a family and strengthen one's community. This can happen by having biological children. Obviously, that's the most obvious one. But it also can be by taking on other people in need, helping other people have a home that might not have had before. But because you are two people now running a home, it spreads your resources further. And then by creating also disciples as a family unit as well. Like, Melissa, you can't have kids. Okay, but are you creating disciples there? Nathan's asking, do you think married people who are infertile should be encouraged to adopt so they're still raising up the next generation? I always encourage adoption as a whole. My wife and I have always talked about wanting to do it. And basically, right when we started to look into adoption, of course, as always happens, that's when we had our kids. But I would definitely always encourage people to adopt. Problem is that, oh my goodness, our culture is so hostile to adoption right now, not just because of abortion, but because of how expensive it is. Like, basically, you have to be a foster parent and adopt through the state and get a child through the foster system, and that can be very difficult because you don't know what you're getting. Coming from someone who was raised in and around the foster system, you don't know what's going to come down that pipeline. So enter Micah. Yes. Let's see here. What was it? There was something that somebody said earlier that made me, I don't even remember. But bottom line is, like, marriage is really important for the purpose of having children, because right now in the West, and actually not just in the West, in the East as well, we see birth rates declining like crazy. We have devalued marriage to a ridiculous degree. We have told people to wait till they're like after college and everything before they get married and have children. We tell young people to that, like, especially young men are being told that it's too dangerous, like, to get married. You're going to lose everything. She has too much control, because the divorce courts are completely skewed in women's favor. We give abortion on demand whenever we want. We have promoted hookup culture, and that, like, oh yeah, watch porn and have sex and do all the things, and it's not that big of a deal. We have continually devalued marriage and the purpose of marriage, to have children and to build up a community, and then all the systems we set up around it. I mean, just for example, having a child costs thousands of dollars. My wife and I, after having good insurance after this baby, it was $5,000, $5,000. And then we wonder why also people run to other things like abortion and stuff, because, like, I can't afford to have a kid. Now, I'm not saying that justifies murder by any stretch of the imagination, but we have created a hostile world toward children and toward marriages. And so in order for us to redeem that, we have to redeem the purpose of marriage, which is have children, build your community, be committed to one flesh union, and don't be given into all this divorce nonsense of divorcing each other for dumb reasons. And even if someone royally screws up, you fight for your marriage. You don't throw it to the wolves, right? Like, you don't just go, well, we'll try better next time. You work that out. You forgive your spouse, and you do those things. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent as opposed to going to my notes, but it doesn't matter. It's important. So a marriage, a union, again, becomes one flesh. And that's why I said the two shall become one flesh. It's not just talking about the physical act of sex. It's talking about you're becoming one body now. So we're talking about theology of the body. This is one body. Why do you think he calls us the body of Christ, and that he's the groom and we are the bride, and that there is this union there? It's the same. It's mirroring the way God loves us. But that's the thing, it becomes one body. My body is no longer my own. My body is no longer Will's. It is my wife. It's Callie's. I walk around in my wife's body. Okay, that terrible joke aside. But people should know the fact that there is that whole, like, my wife's body is mine. It belongs to me, and it belongs to her. And this is not popular nowadays. I don't belong to anybody. I'm nobody's property. Shut up. Yes, you are. You belong to your spouse. Your spouse owns you. Like, they do. You are one body now. Do you own your body? Is it your body, your choice? Okay, well, if it's your body and marriage brings you into one flesh union to create one body, then it's that. Sorry, like when you marry, it is a self-sacrificing, self-giving institution. It is a dying to self every single day. And what's funny is that you're going to end up loving it when you live it that way. So, let's see here. Nathan says, basically all of my uni friends were Christian and said they didn't want children. I just couldn't get my mind around that. My brother and sister-in-law adopted 3 kids from foster care, and yeah, they couldn't discipline at all. It was hard until it was hard until adopted. It was so hard. Yeah, and that is, again, foster system. My brother's adopted through it. I have had a dozen foster siblings, and I can tell you that it is so hard because of how the discipline it works in it. That also, whenever the kids go visit their families, like they go to visitation to see their mom, then things end up being really difficult for the next few days in the home as the kids readjust because they're in this limbo state between the two. And then even worse, and the other way that we're making adoption worse is that a lot of adoptions now are what we call open adoptions. So it means that the parents, the biological parents, have rights still to see the child, which is garbage. It's not good for the kids. I am telling you right now, it's not good for the kids during young influential ages to have access to their biological parents after they've been adopted. It's not good for them. When they're adults, hey, you should have that contact information for their biological parents. And then when the child's an adult, they have the option to contact them if they want. But those biological parents need to stay the heck away. If you could not take care of your kids, you got to be trusted to take care of your kids. You don't belong having your kids, and you don't belong having an influence in their life on those kids. If someone else is raising your kids, they are their kids. Sorry, not sorry. Fight me. So anyhow, so yeah, in the 60s, the birth rate was about 300 births per 1,000 married women between 18 and 45. Now it's 46 out of 1,000. That's out ridiculous. And as Nick says, I didn't want kids back in the day, not because I hated kids. I was scared of being a bad father. So dudes are the bride of Christ based. Yeah, they are. We are the bride of Christ. It's the thing. So Paul took no prisoners on that. But yeah, right here, like, but a lot of people don't want them for a number of reasons. But we need to anyway. So a marriage union again becomes one flesh. So your body belongs to them. There is, this is of course referring to the sexual act, but again, because it creates children and all that. But also, one flesh means one body. A body doesn't function separately from itself, which means you and your wife, or in my situation, you and your wife. If you're a woman listening to this, you with your husband, okay? Just interpolate the entire time. I'm not going to keep qualifying this back and forth. It'll just be too redundant. So you with your spouse, right? So you and your spouse now are one body. You are equal in this. You are side by side in this. You're not great. You men aren't greater than her. She's not greater than you. There's no male or female within Jesus Christ. You are all, Jesus Christ is the great equalizer. You are all equal together, side by side, working for the kingdom, and side by side working in the home. It works together. So a body doesn't function though separately from itself. So when you are married, you have to understand that if you're trying to function separately, you're dividing your body. It works together depending on other parts of the body to do its job. It's another picture of how a married couple, like a man and wife, come together and learn to complement each other. If you look at any successful marriage, you will see two people complementing one another, not working against one another, vying for position or power over the other. It's not about oppressing the other one. It's not about vying for position of power. It's none of those things. You'll see two people who work together and they complement one another. Okay. So now some people are going to be like, is that complementarianism? Is that egalitarianism? What does that mean? I am going to do that conversation at another time, but you should be able to pick up enough on this, what I'm saying here, to be able to figure it out. So it's about, yeah, exactly. It's about dying to self. Exactly. So right there, it is. That's one of the biggest problems. Like when you ever see an unsuccessful marriage, you'll find one or two people are being extremely selfish. They're unrealistic expectations. One person trying to push the other one to do things as opposed to working together. I have found over time that me and my wife, we actually care and like passionately care about very precious little, about different stupid little things. Stop fighting over stupid little things. They're not worth it. You know what? If they like that thing on the left side versus the right side, shut up and put it there. It doesn't matter. Okay. Like some of the things that people fight about are just the most outrageous things ever. But every successful marriage you'll find is that. it entails selflessness and mutual submission with one another. For example, Ephesians 5:22 through 33. Everyone is very familiar with this passage. He goes, "Wives, submit to your own husbands as the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands." So, yeah, guess what? That means wives, die to self. You submit everything to your husband and just submit everything unto Jesus Christ. But here's what's funny. Paul doesn't stop there at wives, does he? He goes, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, because he's saying that's the image. Remember, we are the bride of Christ. So he's looking to the bride and saying, what is the bride supposed to do with Jesus Christ? Submit to everything that Jesus Christ has told them to do. Right? Okay, great. Okay. So, but what does he say? Husband loves your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he may sanctify her, having cleansed her by washing of water with the Lord, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it. See, they're the same body, just as Christ does the church, because we are the members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. So he says, wives, submit, just as Christians, you're supposed to submit to Christ. But then he goes, husbands, you're Jesus Christ in this. And what did Jesus Christ do, by the way? So there's this really weird, like almost Protestant idea. I'm not sure if it's just Protestant or Western idea as a whole, because I think it might see it more in Catholicism as well sometimes. But that like Christ, yeah, he's the king. Therefore, we serve him. He doesn't serve us. But that's not what happens. He serves us. Christ humbled himself and became man, and he literally acquiesces to our requests. That's why he says to pray to him. So he like gives you things that are benign sometimes even, right? And then he says, in the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own body. By the way, I want you guys to understand something here. Paul was greatly challenging the view of people in his day, where it was known that women were supposed to submit to every word their husbands said, and that they were going to listen to him. And that's what an honorable wife did. And a good man should be an honorable husband who treats her well, but you know, he's still the unquestionable authority in the home. And then it's like, he gets to Paul here, who's going, no, she's your own body. Even you're supposed to submit to her as well, just as Christ submits and gives himself to the church. He gave everything to the church. So give everything to your wife, which is submission and humility language, which, by the way, is not something that you would have often heard back then, especially from someone like a Pharisee. So you have to understand, he's being the great equalizer here. He's saying, no, women are just as valid in that marriage as a man, which is pretty powerful. And it challenges, and by the way, this is the root of like that built up Western civilization, the equality of men and women. And what drives me bonkers about it is nowadays we have taken that, we've completely distorted it. And then all the equality talk that people have nowadays, by the way, is ironic that they like disparage the church, even though the church is literally the one that is the one who did this for them. So, curious if you mean John's Walton view on Genesis not presenting a template for a marriage. It's similar to Brandon Robertson's progressive queer theory argument. Yeah, no. It's definitely a template for marriage. Jesus used it as a template for marriage. So I have a hard time taking that sort of thing. Anyway, DS says, by giving married couples rights and benefits under the law, it then requires that others in the LGBTQ space be given those same rights and benefits. Nope, wrong. You have to qualify. But I will talk about that here in a minute. So, but I disagree. See, this is that weird thing that I held when originally, which is like, well, you know, we live in a free country and therefore free people can be able to do what they should be able to do. And I used to be like, yep, so it doesn't matter what people do with marriage, but that's wrong. It's not true, because not all things are equal under the law, and not all people behave in a way that is equally viable and or equally permissible. And so marriage all those governmental benefits, why those things actually exist under the law, like tax benefits, for example, is because you're having children and they cost more. So if you're having children, you're giving birth to kids, you get some benefits from the government. Now, I personally think the government should just be out of marriage altogether. I don't think they should be involved in the marriage conversation. I think it should be something within communities that is done within communities, and communities hold things accountable. But that's neither here nor there. But the benefits exist because you have children. That's why they are encouraging you to have children to try to relieve some of that financial pressure from people. So and Diaz says, in Japan, you have a legal ceremony at the mayor's office, and then whichever religious ceremony you choose. The legal rights and benefits are based solely on the legal ceremony. This is the solution. Now, I don't think that's the solution either, because the government's involved and whatever. Yeah, and I don't think that just any union should be legally recognized. So, yeah, no, not every union is equally valid. So when we're going to talk about that here in a minute. So, all right. So right there, that he talks about the equalization between men and women, that it is a picture of Christ in the church. Wives submit to the husbands, but Christ also serves and submits to his wife. So that's something to keep in mind. Christ submits to the church and serves the church with humility, and we are to submit to Christ and serve him with humility also. This is why marriage is a reflection of God, two opposite beings working together with one another in union and covenant with one another. So, yeah. Yeah. Hearing your libertarian streaks. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm a small government guy. I'm like, leave the government out of my business. But the problem is I took a libertarian view of this, like let people do whatever they want and it doesn't matter. I used to have like that view, but I actually like left the Libertarian Party essentially. I'm pretty much more of a conservative in a lot of areas. And I feel like conservatives need to actually conserve. That's where I'm at right now. I'm like, no, you actually need to conserve, which means that you do not need to play the secular game of all things are equal, because they're not all things are not equal. Heterosexual marriage that is committed to one another for one life, having children and being profitable for their community, plugged into their local community, plugged into the church, being a reflection of masculinity and femininity to everyone, being this idea of, again, childbearing people is not the same thing as two gay people who love each other. It's just not. They will never be able to have children. The children they have to have, it will have to be fostered, adopted, or something like a surrogate. And then also we see some horror stories that have happened with kids who've been adopted in such company, and it's important that kids have a male and female role model. So yeah, let's see. Studies have shown that kids fare best with both their biological mother and father. The state original recognized the institution of marriage because it helps to effectively raise the next generation. And nowadays we have completely gotten rid of that. So, and also which is kind of sad, but yeah, and it was to reflect the biological parents. Exactly. So first, let's talk about why marriage in the Bible. We can talk more about this as we go. So why marriage in the Bible? So again, it's a reflection of God's creation and purpose. God is a creator. He's the God of life, not the God of death. He refers himself as the God of life often, or he says to choose life, which is why a marital union literally brings life through children. And now let's say you're infertile and you're like, well, this doesn't feel like that pertains to me. You have to understand that even the sexual act in marriage is a reflection of that design. Even though our bodies, and I talked about this in my first episode, we have broken bodies and because of a sin-torn world, but it doesn't mean that gets rid of their design. It just means that sin and corruption has destroyed a lot of things. So I want you to understand that there can be destruction in our bodies. We can have deformities. We can have things that are wrong with it, but it doesn't mean that we do whatever we want with them. We still want to reflect the created intent for those things, because it's a reflection of God and his order. And God is a God of order, not a God of chaos. There's a purpose for all the things that are created, and we want to reflect those things. And that's why, frankly, penis and vagina, the way they go together, is clearly meant to be designed for a particular purpose: pleasure and babies. Okay. All right. Biology lesson, y'all. All right. So in Genesis 1, we see multiple differences created. And this is important for people who also want to hold to same-sex unions being okay. Genesis 1, we see multiple differences created: light, dark, day, night, evening, morning, land, and sea. These things weren't meant to cause chaos. Rather, they're differences that were to create harmony. So suddenly, verse 27 comes along, and God says, God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. This shows the two opposite sides coming together to bring harmony. This is what we call oppositional harmony within creation. In Genesis 2:18, it says, Then the Lord God said, It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him. Now out of the ground, the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all the livestock and to the birds of the heavens and to every beast of the field. But for Adam, there was not found a helper fit for him. He even is described as fit or suitable. In Hebrew, I want to try to say if I say as kenegdo is the word to be fit or suitable. We don't have actually a word in English for this, by the way. And this is one of those things that kind of get lost in translation. It expresses both sameness and difference. So it says it didn't have one fit for him. Sameness and then difference. It's a combination of K, which is as, like, or similar, and neged, which is opposite, in front of, or against. So Eve is similar to Adam in the sense that she's human, but she's different from Adam because of her biological sex. Both are equally human, but both are differently sexed. So when it describes her as flesh of my flesh and bone of my bones, this is describing her common humanity, but it celebrates her similarity and her difference, for she was taken out of a man. This entire passage is about sexual difference: light, dark, land, sea, male, female. It's all about that sexual difference between the two and how they come together in oppositional harmony. She came out of the man, and now men, for the rest of creation, would come out of women through birth. That's not oppositional harmony. I don't know what is. It's really cool how God has a lot of this poetry involved. It's really great. So, Kevin Day, I'll get to you here in it. No, so actually I'll just address this right now. You say that singleness is against God's design. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the institution of marriage itself. Marriage is meant for procreation and community building and relationship in that sense. I never said anything about the necessity of marriage, that you have to get married and that you're in sin if you're single. That's not what I said. But it is saying that it is a vocation of man to steward the earth. So, and that comes into being married and reproducing. Now this is actually one of the things, like, if you feel like you ought to be single, let's say, you're like, that's what, Paul says that he'd rather that be that way. And I feel that way. In 1 Corinthians 7, Paul says, hey, but if you burn with passions, it's better that you get married to a spouse and have sex with them. Okay. Better do that than be led away in sexual immorality. Well, then if you are burning, according to Paul, find a spouse, go do it. Go find a spouse. But if you don't, and you're like, well, sexual sin isn't something I really struggle with, and you want to stay single, and you're not in sin, you can stay single, no big deal. But I will say, I think very few people are intended to be single. I don't think a lot of people have that in them. That's going to be finding any young man who's going to be like, yeah, I have no sex drive, and I don't really feel like I should get married. Like, okay, that's going to be very rare. But anyway. So anyway, most translations, though, say that she came out of his side, right? Like, oh, he was taken out of a man, it came out of his rib. But this was never what the word was used for. It's the Hebrew word salah, which it means side, but it most commonly is used to describe the side of a sacred piece of architecture that's often used to describe, like, the temple or the tabernacle. So notice the sacredness prescribed to Eve here. She is as if the side of the temple. And who is the body of, and we are what? The new temples of God with the Holy Spirit. Keep that in mind. There's a lot of imagery here that's talking about the body and the sacredness of your body in union with God and in union with a spouse. So the image here is mankind being split in half to create a woman, essentially. Two opposite sides of the same thing being working together for the perfection of God's will. So the one flesh union, it's not just describing their marriage or the sexual act, but it's announcing that God created marriage to be an institution and a reflection of his will and design for all future marriages. In Matthew 19, the narrator in Genesis is revealed even to be God himself, right? So He says, then to leave father and mother. The point of marriage isn't only to reflect God's design in nature, nor to reflect God's relationship with mankind, but also to leave father and mother and to build your own family, to create life, to be a creator. It's a step of maturity to be on one's own, right? It's really to create a new family, to have children, to be fruitful, to multiply. Successful civilizations are always built on proper family units. Strong and grounded civilizations will be built on strong family units, and that is a calling for you if you're a husband or a wife. You are going to be your fatherhood or motherhood is kingdom work. You're doing the work of Christ, and you're building the kingdom not just spiritually but physically by having kids and building that community up within it. So yeah, side, not rib. Yeah, exactly. So Jesus not being married is fascinating. What might this suggest for sexual ethics? I mean, just basically that, like, you don't have to be married if you don't want to. And he was committed. And also because he was God in the flesh, I'm also like, probably wasn't a need. Like the whole point is like, if you're God in the flesh, the point of marriage is to reflect God's union with, us, like the covenant. It's like, well, he's God in the flesh. So I don't think he needed to reflect that here on earth. But yeah, I mean, it also shows the fact that it's not sinful to be single. It's not a sin. You can be single and not be sinning. You could live your life out for the kingdom, which is exactly what Jesus did. Let's see. KCD said, amen about the open adoption. My wife and I adopted and had no desire to do open adoption. Yeah, darn straight. You do not do open adoption. Those suck. Let's see. Nick, Jesus' singleness in this earthly ministry is a sign that he was preserving himself for the future heavenly marriage with the entire church, which is why he goes to prepare a place. Somebody paid attention to Bible class. All right. Okay. I could definitely see there being a rise in singleness due to those tricked into mutilating their bodies and losing their sex drives. That's been the story of many detransitioners. Yeah, exactly. And keep in mind, remember what I said in the last episode, as I was quoting Christopher West, right? Which is, if marriage is the first institution that God created to bring about his will, then where is the enemy going to aim his arrows? Marriage and the sex act itself, which is why sexual perversion has always been a thing in creation, why it's being pushed further in our culture, which is why we're mutilating our kids, which is why we're doing all these terrible things, because it's actually undercutting God's perfect union with man and wife. That's why. It's all part of it. It's all part of to destroy the intended reason for marriage. It wants to undercut all those things, all in the name of like secular humanism and all the other garbage out there. So anyway, it's a step of maturity again. So all right, so to go out to be on one's own, right, to leave father and mother. So to form a one flesh marital union according to God, it involves two persons, both human and also sexually different. So if we're going with the biblical route, there is no other way to define marriage than one man and one woman. That was very obvious in Genesis. Only like until 5 minutes ago did everyone accept this in Christendom, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Sexual difference is key because God wants to bring unity to things that are different. The land and the sea, the light and the dark, all those things, the male and the female. He wants to bring unity to things that are different. And he wants those gifts, those benefits of both to shine through in a way that is beautiful and a reflection of God and his people. So now let's get to procreation. Let's talk about that for a minute. When the Bible discusses sexual difference in Genesis 1:27, it follows right after the command to be fruitful and multiply. So sexual difference, and then be fruitful and multiply, to populate the earth. This is the design and purpose of sexual union. The birth and rearing of children, Preston Sprinkle said this, the birth and rearing of children are designed to take place within the lifelong covenants of marriage. So we have birth rates declining at horrifying rates right now, but it's because we devalued marriage and we've made divorce super easy, and then we make children expensive. That's why. And what's amazing to me is like, yeah, would I prefer a small government without all these different governmental systems? And do I think the church should be the one that provides a lot of those things. Absolutely. Am I one for like a government run healthcare? No, I'm not all those things. But you also have to understand that our system now is so entirely screwed up that when I see Christians, the first things Christians want to do is like cut funding to maybe things that could actually help people a little bit more. Like, how about we stop giving millions to LGBTQ training over in like Nigeria? How about we like, if we're gonna put our tax money towards stuff, let's put it toward actually helping people like do real life stuff, like have children. So it's just it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm a very conservative person, but I mean, dang it, if you're gonna take my money and you're gonna have a bunch of government systems, and it better be for the purpose of giving it to people who actually could use it. But instead, we just keep we keep people on the same government teeth, so to speak, and we give our money to stupid crap. It just drives me nuts. So in both Old Testament and New Testament, having kids, or at least trying to have kids, was an intrinsic part of one's marriage. So much so that laws had to be put in place to protect women who were infertile in their marriages. So it was actually just a given. Like, this is just what you do when you're married. The point was to procreate and build one society. This whole idea that, oh man, we eventually we fall in love, and like we fall in love, we do these things and all that. Well, like, okay, that's not what it was back then. It was actually largely economic. Actually, let's first talk. Hold on, I see this right here with by Nathan. He says, as a Canadian, I've always found American conservatives' aversion to public health care weird. I understand that as a Canadian, that's a cultural difference, but it's also because we've seen governments absolutely reject care for people who could be helped, and people have died because they just get rejected care because the government just says, nope, we're not cutting the check for that big. Per person is going to have to die. And it's terrible. So a lot of people are like, nope, don't like that. Also because taxes get really increased. And so, but my whole thing is that we have the worst system of both. Like, now granted, we have great healthcare as far as like, you're going to get treated and you get treated well. I mean, we have the best health care that you can find. The problem is at the cost. We have is a bunch of government funding, highly regulated, and then also capitalistic all at the same time, which just creates nothing but a bloated price tag for everybody, and it just becomes extremely difficult. So I'm over here like, I feel like I keep saying like, the United States is just pick a lane. What are we doing here, y'all? I'm over here like, create free markets, deregulate a bunch of crap, let these hospitals compete for my dollar, and then I'll have like Amazon, but for healthcare. I could order a doctor to my door and get a prescription within on like Hospital Prime. Like, give me that. That's what I want. And then it'll be cost a lot less. But anyway, but yeah, exactly. What the government giveth, the government taketh. This is the thing with America, by the way. We're very skeptical. Actually, a lot of conservatives, I should say, are very skeptical of the government. We're like, we don't trust you. And it's mainly probably because like our country began in a rebellion. So like, we don't trust the government. Anyway. So yeah, exactly. The reason why our healthcare is jacked is because it's stuck between private and social healthcare. Exactly. So it's disaster. And as a guy who broke his leg and had major surgery without insurance here, I tasted that at the full brunt. I'm like, this is why. This is why people push for government healthcare, because of bills like what I just received after staying there overnight in a hospital. The surgery wasn't even the expensive part. Anyway, this is about healthcare. This is about marriage, but this all let's tie into like helping people have kids, like encouraging children. Like, we ought to be creating a world and a country and a culture that encourages having kids, and all the systems in place are designed to encourage having children within a stable marriage, because kids do better in stable marriages. But instead, we've created literally the opposite. We've created it to be so hostile to families, so hostile toward having kids, hostile to marriages. Men don't even want to get married right anymore because they've heard too many horror stories of men losing everything because the courts are so screwed. We have women basically being like, oh, well, we don't need to get married to have sex, and they just give men what they want right away, and given into base desires. And then like, oh, well, why does a man want to marry me? It's like, well, because the whole thing was a man, oftentimes men's initial interest in a woman is sexual in nature. They see her, ooh, she's attractive, and then they get to know her, and then, you know, if they get to know her, they like her, and then he's supposed to want to pursue her and marry her as a person, because now he gets to know the person behind what he was attracted to. And then what you run into now, it's like, well, now there's no There's no pursuit. There's no pursuit for anything. There's no reason for him to be better. He could objectify her all day long, and you call it female empowerment, and it's called great. And then she's like, yeah, look, I'm desired and wanted by these men. It's just disgusting. We've taken everything, we flip it upside down, we destroy the nature of things, and then you'll wonder why everything sucks and why people are unhappy. Like, ironically, even though women have all these freedoms now, they're more miserable statistically than they've ever been. Wonder what's going on there. Maybe it's because we have perverted what men and women are supposed to be. Anyway, so this doesn't mean that they, so chosen childless marriages, just so we're clear, is very contested in church history. But I do think if people are going to have that people who are able to have kids choose not to, then that does raise some serious questions. I'm not sure if that, like, I don't think I can comfortably say that that is good. I mean, even what's his name that in the Old Testament who wasn't having kids with his brother's wife after she had passed, right? Like, he said he spilled his seed onto the ground. Like, that was considered bad. Like, because she was supposed to be given children and he wasn't, because that was considered part of the duty of that. Like, that was considered a very big deal, like marriages and children. Like, I'm not saying like you have to be on board with all the things that they were back then, but like, it was something that was actually a very big deal. So if someone comes up to me and asks, we feel called to get married, but we don't feel called to have children, then the question really comes, are you really called to be married? Right? Or are you just horny? Like, frankly, like, are you just horny, or are you actually called for a marriage? Because a marriage involves life-giving, life covenant, all the things, including childbearing. So I will say that anyone who says they feel called to be married but not to have children, which I've heard way too often, is the burden of proof is on you then to show me biblically or historically how that is even on the table in God's callings whatsoever, or if you aren't confusing things with your own people, with your own feelings, I should say. Paul, you say a great analogy I've heard for our healthcare system is that think about buying a present for someone you don't know with someone else's money, but you're somehow going to still pay for it. Yeah. By the way, Paul, good to see you in the chat, buddy. Paul's a good one of like my best friends, and he lives here locally. I'm surprised you're on the stream, dude. Aren't you supposed to be in bed? I don't know. They just had a baby. Everyone congratulate Paul on their beautiful, perfect little girl, Juniper. She is adorable. So anyway, but they're literally like, what, 2 weeks old? Is that where we're at? 2 weeks? Anyway, chosen childless marriages, again, I think are an issue. So again, infertile is not your choice. So if you're infertile, don't hear that you're sinning. Infertility is not a choice. It's not a chosen childless marriage. And but being childless when you can is a choice. Okay, the Bible doesn't give absolute clarity, but it seems to say it in every other way besides just saying like, no, you're supposed to have kids. But you know, again, so it seems to hit around the topic pretty strongly. So marriage is an intrinsic procreative structure or biological potential for procreation, at least built into it. So that's something there. So the other thing for marriage, practically speaking, within the Bible is obviously companionship. Marriage should never be viewed as an emotionless baby-making institution. It is designed to be deeply relational and give people a unique way for them to bond with one another. This is why God said it is not good for man to be alone. He was targeting that as aspect of it. And this is why, like, but there is also an economic thing to it. One of the biggest things that one of the biggest problems that people have nowadays in our modern day culture is they view marriage as purely companionship. That's not it. That's actually like not even the only thing. Like, but that's like the thing that people like target the most is companionship. But it's economic, it's companionship, it's procreative, it's a lot of things other than just companionship. So you need to know what you're signing up for. And back in the first century, it was a highly economic move for people to get married. And it was an economic tool to climb the economic ladder. And it wasn't just viewed as like, oh, I need to love this person. It was viewed as, that's a good family. We're a good family. We're going to make a proposal to this. And it was like people make it akin to a business deal. But at the same time, as soon as they got married and when all that stuff was happening, they were supposed to be operating when they're betrothed as a union with each other in marriage, essentially, still, even when they were just betrothed. They're supposed to have that companionship and that they would not be alone. So, let's see. Yeah, congrats, Paul. Yeah, 2 weeks Friday, dude. That's crazy. Yeah, it was actually really funny. So the Hovine, Paul and his wife, they've always been like with us on the kid thing. Like we had Ellie, and then a few months later, they had their daughter. And then we got pregnant with Ari, and now they have Juniper. It's just so funny. It's just like we're on the same like baby calendar, and it's weird. But anyhow, so yeah, there's a highly economic side to marriage, and there's nothing wrong with that either, by the way. So let's see. Christina said, in origin, church history. In origin, church people were pretty negative about our family size. Oh, in Oregon, origin. I'm so stupid. I'm like thinking church fathers. In Oregon, church people were pretty negative about our family size. We didn't use government funds and raise our kids well. California, weirdly, is better. Everyone loves that we have lots of kids. That is really weird. Even the left coast has some redeemable qualities. Check that out. Our culture in church needs to change so bad, though. That is part of the issue. Yep. It does need to change. So, so Nathan was thinking church father. That's funny. All right. So why marriage, practically speaking? So that's all the biblical reasons. What about practically? So there's lots of data out there. Lots of data out there in regards to how our hormones and brain chemistry work, life in general, when one follows the biblical model. When marriage is done right, it leads to many positive results. Now, some people, when I ever bring this up there, people are like, oh, that means like no STDs or unwanted pregnancies. Yes, that's true. That's bare bones, though. That's not the only reason. There are many other reasons. For example, if people wait to have sex until they're married, so let's just I'm just going to spit off some stats for you. So wait until marriage. 15% rated their marriage as higher and more satisfying than those who had premarital sex. 22% reported higher stability and 20% higher satisfaction because they had no one else to compare it to. And all their attachment hormones all attached to one person, and a bunch of other things, and they're fully committed to one another. There's no competition. There's no confused minds. It's all focused. Also, the people who tend to wait till marriage are the people who usually have a certain amount of virtue within them with certain values attached. So that's another reason why you're going to see those higher stats. Also, living together before marriage. You hear this all the time. Well, I always test drive a car before I ride it and thinking that's like somehow the same thing. Your husband and your wife's not a car. I hate that analogy. They're not an object that you ride, okay? That's not what it is. It's freaking stupid. And every time someone says it, they need to be throat punched. It's dumb. It's stupid. It's childish. It's immature. And it's not even close to what marriage is. Anyway, but those who live together before marriage, all you people who test drive before you get married, you are 1.31 times higher at risk for divorce. So that's 131% for those who aren't good at math. And so that's 131%, especially for women. Divorce risk only decreases. So some people are like, no. See, when they live together, the divorce rate decreases. Look at this statistic. No. It only decreases for the first year, because many of the growing pains of people's first years of marriages have already been worked out. However, married men who cohabitated before marriage are less dedicated to the wives than married men who did not first cohabitate. Fun fact for you. So concerns about premarital, and this is from a study, concerns about premarital cohabitation may be legit. Substantial evidence associates cohabitation with negative relationship outcomes. Premarital cohabitation is viewed as a risk factor for divorce, as it predicts later marital instability, poorer marriage quality, and less relationship satisfaction. Compared to married couples, cohabitating couples argue more, have more trouble resolving conflicts, are more insecure about their partner's feelings, and have more problems related to their future goals. These findings are concerning for couples considering premarital cohabitation, but a closer look shows that it gets even more complicated. So anyway, but the point here is that, yeah, it's not good. It is not good for you. Yeah. So then you get to Christian marriage satisfaction. This is a fun fact for you all. So for those who wait till marriage and they're in Christian marriages, because a lot of the values go hand in hand, which is why people wait till marriage and don't cohabitate and do all those things, have higher marriages, not only scientifically, but also because of values. But Christian marriage satisfaction. Those in highly dedicated religious marriages are actually faring far better than those who are not. They are more satisfied emotionally and sexually, have more children, less likely to cheat on their spouse. Religious women actually report over 50% greater satisfaction in their marriages than their non-religious counterparts. And you tell me that Christianity sucks. The highest rated group, by the way, for sexual satisfaction are Christian women. Yeah, that's right. Christian women, which is the opposite of what the world always says. The Christian women are the prudes who hate sex. No, stats say Christian women freaking love sex and having a great time with their husbands. By the way, all you young men out there who want a sex crazy wife and have all that fun, marry a good Christian woman. You'll have a good time. You might not be able to keep up. Just saying. And all God's people said amen. All right. And the study went on to say, in a relationship quality index that took into account attachment, commitment, satisfaction, and stability, highly religious women whose husbands shared their faith, notice that, shared their faith, were ahead of every other group. They have 5 times the amount of sex than unmarried people. This is also hilarious to me. There's a stupid idea that like, oh man, like I was told this. I was told this when I got married at 22 years old. I was told, man, you're just way too young to be getting married. You know, like live your life, have fun. And what they mean by that is, one, marriage is apparently isn't fun. 2, go have sex with other women. Go out there, play, hook up with women, get a variety, baby. And like, oh, and all the shows and the sitcoms always show the ladies, man, like Joey, right, from Friends, like, oh, but he's not married, but he has all the sex with all the women. Maybe once every 6 months. Homie, when you're married, you have it whenever you want. You go to sleep with that person every night. And because you live with each other and you lived with each other for years, you're so comfortable with each other. Shoot, man, you could have it whenever you want it. You can be really flirty. You can be really weird. Doesn't matter. You've been married for so long, you guys are comfortable with each other. That's why. I mean, let me ask you, who do you think is going to have more sex? The person who goes to bed with a person that they're attracted to every single night, or the person who lives alone and has to go to the bar and try to shoot his shot? Really? Come on, y'all. Yes, exactly. Christianity is based. Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, I'm laughing so much right now. I'm glad you are. Here's what's hilarious about it. Y'all, this is basically what the curriculum I did with my students here, my 6th to 12th graders. And it was actually really funny when I said the people who have the highest rated sex life, like sexual satisfaction, is Christian women. One of my boys off in the corner like smiles. He goes, like he was just like, that's awesome. I'm like, yeah, all the stuff you've been told is stupid. Paul is same. Paul, like you and I have gone on tangents about this stuff. Like Paul and I vibe on this. Like one of the best parts about Paul is like he's super family guy as well. And so we have like that shared value, and we're both like, this is why we got all our views of sex from the world. You're stupid. Get married out of high school. That's awesome. Go have children right away. You know, you're 18 and horny. Go get married out of high school. You'll be fine. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do if you're that way. Get married if you want to. And it's a good thing. Marry someone with the same values, same faith. You'll have a great time. And oh, by the way, all the studies show, remember, if you save yourself for marriage, you do all that, you get married young, you have a more successful marriage anyway. So we're telling everyone, oh, you get married when you're young, you're going to fail. Now, all studies show the opposite. You get married young and you save yourself for marriage, you're going to be doing great. And by the way, the greatest generations of our generations before us all knew that. That's why they got married even at like 16, 17. Like, how many have a great grandma who got married at 16, right? And like, we were married for 48 years until he passed. Like, apparently, but we get all our ideology from the world of being like, no, wait till after college and all that. No, stupid. Like, if you're young and you're in love and you both are Christians and all that, set our kids up for success. Set them up with a lifelong marriage. So anyway, let's see here. Psycho Bible says, I was married at 21. It's disturbing how many people thought that was too young. And I had but if I had a kid at 18, that would be considered, they would have considered that normal. Right? Like, oh, they're a kid, a young parent. That's fine. But yeah, getting married at a young age, it's so backwards. And then we wonder why the family unit's falling apart. All the things are falling apart. Well, that's why. It's stupid. It is the most asinine, shooting yourself in the foot nonsense ever. I'm so passionate about this. I work with young people, by the way. So I'm like deathly passionate about this, where I'm like, don't screw up your life. Do it this way. Don't listen to their advice. Their advice is crap. There's a good friend of mine, Brandon. Paul knows him. And he was going to wait till marriage and not till marriage. He was going to wait till after college and all this stuff. But he was like, talking to me. He's like, but me and her, we love each other so much. And like, I'm so attracted to her. And like, oh, how do I control myself? I don't like, he's struggling with that. It's like, what do I do? You know, it's also not from a Christian home. And so he's like, like he's losing his mind. He wants to live a holy life to God, but also like he's a man and he's attracted to this woman. And how does he do it? Well, I told him, like, well, why are you waiting till after college? You can marry her now. He's like, well, why would I do that? It's like, but you know, I'm busy with classes and stuff. I'm like, you're busy with classes now. You have to go see each other on dates, probably late at night. And that's when temptation is striking you the most, because you guys are going to work all day, you're going to classes all day. The only time you can see each other is late at night. Well, what if at late at night, you guys are chilling out in the same house, spreading your income in one home, by the way, you're not paying rent at two places, only one. And then, you know what? When you're feeling a certain way toward her, you want to get frisky, you can. Sin free, baby. And you can go and have all the nasty filthiness that you want with your wife. And, you know, 2 minutes later, when you're done, you can just go back out and do your homework. Who cares? Like, you can do that. And it's better. And it's funny because they actually ended up marrying her. It's like, you know, the reason why is because our conversation, I realized that you're right. And guess what? They're happily married. Almost like the world is full of crap. Anyway, it just gets me all sorts of worked up. Paul says, we were married at 22 and 18, coming up on 9 years in July. Wouldn't have it any other way. Based. This is why I love you, Paul. Rather than figuring out life on our own and then try to figure out how to live together after finding out who we are, we were able to just figure out life once together. I'm going to, for anyone who's watching this and repeat, I want you to read this sequence again. That right there. Oh, we'll figure out life first. No, what you're saying, figure out life first, is figure out what you like in life, selfishly, yourself, preferred. Like once you get all that, like, okay, now bring someone into your life after you've already have yourself established in such a way that can be too rigid to even be flexible. No, when you're younger, you're more flexible. Oof. 2 minutes later. Look, y'all, don't have such low expectations of me, okay? Golly. It's a long time. Keep up. Anyway. I'm not old and I am not old. I need an adult here. This is not okay. All right. So people are going to watch this later and be like, wow, this guy's unhinged. And you're right, but this is a topic I'm passionate about. And it's so funny when I'm talking to the students about it, because they're just like, woo. So they have 5 times the amount of sex. The Baylor study also showed that those who engage more in religious activities have better sex lives within their marriages. And so I could go on and on about that, but you get the idea. Christian marriage is, and marriage in general, has been always, marriage in every society ever, about sexual difference, male and female, and having children. Now, they might have polygamous marriages, they might have a lot of other things that they do within marriage, but that's what it was. Male and female, sexual difference was a key aspect to a marriage. It was not considered a marriage unless it was sexually different, which is why the people with this whole like, oh, well, you know, if you have special rights under the law, then we should be able to have special rights under the law. No, you don't get to just redefine stuff. If everyone in society for the last however many years, for thousands upon thousands of years, have always said that marriage is sexual difference, you don't get to walk in and redefine the terms. And we don't have to bend it over for that. We don't have to redefine terms for that. No, it's not a marriage. A marriage is sexual difference that has the potential to bring children to, in the purpose of building up your community. If you can't do that, if you're not of the opposite sex and you have no potential or even reflection of a design for it, then it's not a marriage. You are just two people who shack up together and have sexual relations with each other. But that's it. That's it. there is no childbearing purpose there. So not only within a Christian worldview, but within actually just a practical worldview, what is the point of marriage? Anyone can love each other and just live together. That's not what it is. The point of marriage is a lifelong covenant for the purpose of building a community and raising children. Because with two people, not only do you get to birth children, but you also get to walk alongside them with two parents and juggle that. And the giftings for men and women, you could be like, well, gay people get adopted, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, they can. But here's the thing. A male and female bring different things to the table. The mother brings a lot of the nurturing. Like I'm right now, like my daughters are under 4 years old. Like I have Ellie and then I have Ari, 4-year-old and 3-month-old. So 4 years and 3 months. Guess who does most of the nurturing? My wife. Do I feed my baby? Yes. Do I play with my daughter? Yes. But guess what? Whenever the kids are upset, the one they want is mom, not me. I try. I'm like, oh, honey, I'll help you. No, I want mom. Like, right? Like that's a thing that happens. So, like that difference is important. But also, whenever there's a thunderstorm and it's like big, loud, and scary, you know who my daughter wants to go to? Me. I want daddy here. She wants me to wrap her in dad's big arms and hold her while the lightning flashes. She's terrified, but she feels like she's safe and more protected under the man. Almost like we're designed for something, y'all. Anyway, drives me crazy. Male and female bring different things to the marriage table. We just do. And no, I do not have to redefine marriage just because you think I should. Nope. And no one should. And everyone needs to stop playing that stupid game. It's not a game worth playing where everyone just gets it. And that's one of the biggest problems with the postmodern world in general. We keep letting people just redefine crap all the time. You know, gender meant sex, you know, again, until 5 minutes ago, until now it's like, oh, well, now it's on a spectrum and now it means something else, you know, even though on our driver's license, it literally says still gender M or F, like what? Oh, that's an unfortunate thing to say. Anyway, some things you don't realize what you said until afterwards, but it is what it is. All right. So, let's see. Unhinged is the best. Let's go. No one's gonna watch this later, Will. Don't worry. Yeah, it's true. No one watches my theology, the body stuff. No one will watch this. It'll fine. It'll go off in the ether of the internet. Psycho Bible says the problem is we expect too little out of teens, so we will consider young 20-somethings as emerging adults. Right? And isn't the whole point of like being a teen is to be an emerging adult as you're a teenager, and then that's why when you're 18 you're supposed to be a legal adult. That's why it's like, all right, you've been on this little test course, now go fly, little bird. And now we have like delayed adolescence until like 25. It's stupid. And that's if you're lucky. Let's see. Paul says it's because of the invention of adolescence. Before teenagers, we had kids and adults and the proper expectations of both. And actually, I'm going to talk about that. Shoot, we have a 16-year-old general that stole an enemy ship in the founding of the U.S. We're not arguing he should have been focusing on grades and girls now, are we? I mean, freaking what is Alexander the Great was 16 when he first started. Like, come on, dude. Well, and so this is actually a thing that right here when you said about adolescence and teenagers. So there's a great book that's called The Anxious Generation. Everyone should read it, about Generation Z and the digital childhood and the anxiety and all the stuff we're seeing. And one of the things he talks about that has died in our society is coming of age events. We don't have a time when a child actually becomes an adult. So think of bar and bat mitzvahs. You know, when a girl would have her first, when she was 12, she would get her bar mitzvah, and she was considered a woman. And when they had her first period is when they considered it to be a woman. So women had have a biological thing that's built in. That's like, hey, now you're entering womanhood because you had your first menstrual cycle. Men is a little bit more ambiguous. So what they would do oftentimes in ancient civilizations, that they would do groups. So where women got their moments each, and they had little ceremonies for them. Congratulations, you're a woman now. It wasn't a shameful thing. It was an exciting thing. It was like, yay, you get to come now. Instead of hanging out with the kids, you actually do not hang out with kids any longer. You hang out with adults. That was like what every society did. You now hang out with the adults. You follow us around, and now you are doing it life alongside us as adults. Well, the boys, they would oftentimes do a group together. You know, that's where they do their warrior ceremonies or whatever. They get a group of boys together because they don't have menstrual cycles. So they were like, okay, around this age, you group. Now you guys are considered men, and now you're going to hang with the men. Now, did that mean all those boys were considered men now were like, always a general, like Paul was talking about? No, but did mean that you are one of us now, and we're going to treat you as such, and therefore expectations are upon you to act as such. And we've gotten rid of that in our society. Like, I mean, shoot, nowadays you don't even want to send your kid to the supermarket until they're like 15 years old, where it used to be like, man, when I was a kid, I'd ride my bike down all the way across town to go to the video store like Blockbuster and rent a movie and bring it back for family movie night while my dad was waiting for pizza to show up. That was me in the 90s. And now it's like we've gotten rid of a lot of that stuff, but we got rid of a lot of those coming of age things, and it's actually really actually hurt our kids quite a bit. So you should like and different things to show. Wait, what? I'm so confused on what and different things to the marriage bed. I don't you that's clearly a reference to something. And you should like a Muslim will. Careful now. Wait, you say sound. I think it was like I said like a Muslim now will. Careful now. No, not a Muslim. I'm not about like sexual relations with children. No. You do not want to know. I cannot say my opinion on Islam on live. Let's just say that. But no, but it is a thing where it's like, I mean, Jewish women were being married at 16 and 17. Like they just were in ancient Israel. Like, nowadays we have delayed adolescence to such a ridiculous degree, and I have a lot of problems with how we treat our young people because of that. I think it's actually hindered our young people from growing up. So that's why I think like, hey, when women have this, like when the girls had the menstrual cycle, they were included over here with the women. Now that was happening to girls, 12, 13, very normal. But they weren't really married off until 16 or 17 because women still they still knew like they're young. Doesn't mean we just marry them off right away. But now you're no longer a kid. You're no longer a kid. You're a woman. But you're a woman who is going to have to grow into her womanhood. That's just part of it. So yeah, it's all that stuff. So yeah, stay away from Islam, kids. You said men and women bring different things to the marriage table. So I added that. Oh, and different things to the marriage bed. I see what you did there. But does, because you saw... because this comment has me concerned, Christina. I hope I'm making sense here though on that, where it's like, no, you weren't considered a boy anymore. You weren't considered a girl anymore. You're considered an adult, and you're going to come along with the adults, and we're going to train you now and prepare you for your very next step, which is marriage and having children. That's why like men, when they were 13, what like in Israel, what they were expected to do after that is go build a home, prepare a home. You're going to start preparing a home because you weren't even allowed to get married until you had a home prepared. By the way, that is a hint to Jesus be going, I'll go to prepare a place for you. I'll come again and receive you. It's like a part of the Jewish marriage ceremony. That's like the whole point. It's like, okay, now you're this. Now we're going to, but in order to do that, you had to be trained on how to. So they would like teach them. They'd drag them around, like teach them practical life stuff. So that way, when they were of age, like it's like, okay, now that you're a man, we got to teach you how to do the man stuff. So you can do the ultimate man thing that you probably want to do, which is to get married and have children. So there was this whole idea of switching from one to the other. But once you got to the other, it didn't mean that you just jumped in and you got to run around with everything and do whatever you wanted. And to sit there, or that creeps could marry like young kids. That wasn't the point. The point was like, now that you're considered an adult, we're going to train you as an adult, treat you as an adult. And then once the time comes, you get married and do all those things. So hope that makes sense. I was kidding. I totally got what you meant. Okay, Christina, woo, had me worried. I'm like, did that sound like crazy there? Like, oh, golly, don't do that. Again, I'm a youth pastor. I'm like super sensitive on that stuff. Like, it freaks me out. Like, oh, you gotta remember, the world I work in, I'm like, no, I got to be very clear on what I'm trying to say. Just stop harassing me. Why you got to do that, bro? Like, oh yeah, stay away from Islam, kids. Yes, and again, I can't give my opinion on all that right now. Soft topic. So, all right, let's quickly talk about this, and we'll wrap up. Okay, so to the affirming person, let's talk about same-sex relationships now. To those who affirm same-sex relationships it's important that you understand that we aren't the bad guys at the church. It's important to note that the historical Christian church is not the bad guy in this story. That doesn't mean every church has handled this properly. They haven't been the best when people come out with same-sex attraction, but they're not the bad guy. Christianity and Judaism before that has had a singular teaching regarding homosexuality, being trans, and all those things all throughout antiquity. The teaching regarding this matter has been united, as we will see going forward. So many have come against the church for having this belief, and it has resulted in the church oftentimes standing firm in its teaching, but not always, right? We have churches that have caved. Many claim this hurts the LGBTQ community, but the reality is it also hurts the church to give up on this position. It hurts Christians to expect us to lie. That's why it's like, if you expect me to acknowledge that your husbands or your wives and you two married each other, no, that's actually hurtful for everyone who holds to a traditional view of marriage, because you're expecting me to lie. I do not believe that's a real marriage. A real marriage is one man, one woman, under one God for one life. That's what a real marriage is. And you're asking me to lie and to turn my back on my faith. So it hurts the church as well. So that it's not okay. So and also it hurts the church to keep expecting it to cast down thousands of years of its own teachings. If you want people to respect you, if you affirming people who might never watch this, but if you want people to respect you and your beliefs, then you have to respect others as well, even if you disagree. So therefore, you should be okay with the church living as the church should. I don't expect that we mentioned Islam. I don't expect Muslims to act anything else than Muslims. I think they're wrong. I think there's a lot of problems with Islam, but I don't sit there and demand that they change their religion. I just ask that they leave their religion, right? So, and this is where the LGBTQ movement drives me crazy. They want the church to marry them, to acknowledge them, and to acknowledge their marriage as equal. It's the church to change its beliefs. Why are you expecting Christians to be anything else than Christian? I don't like it. It's not okay. So you can't expect a religion to change vital parts of its core teachings to affirm your own desires. Again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of theology even behind a one man and one woman flesh union covenant in marriage that reflects Christ in the church. And there's like this whole idea of like the creator, the creation, the pursuit, and all those things that are reflected in that. And to say that we now need to redefine marriage is actually hurtful to the church, because they actually help tell us to destroy how we view God and how he relates with us in marriage. So religion teaches us, again, to also rule over our desires, not to give in to them. So to ask the church to say that it's okay that you give in to your desires when the church has never taught it is not okay. Well, no, what we have always taught, the church should always teach that we should rule over our desires. So ask yourself, would you demand Buddhist monks to change their views on their religion? Would you expect Islam to change its teachings on sexual relationships? Because oddly enough, they never talk about Islam's view of sexual relationships, which is way crazier than Christianity's. If your answer is no, though, then ask yourself, why are you expecting Christians to? So I'm just talking to the affirming person right now. If your answer is because Christianity teaches love, then know that we will address this claim as we go forward. But know this, love is defined by God, not by our feelings or our preferences. Christians, again, also aren't oppressing people for having a historically traditional view of marriage. That's not oppression. Understand that Christians are actually trying to liberate people from harmful sexual relationships and ones that don't reflect God's creation or design. And you have to remember, your body was designed for a purpose. So are you living up to the design of the purpose of your body? So, yeah, exactly. No, they don't. They want everyone to not just accept them. They want to be celebrated over and over again with pride and flags and more and more and more. Exactly. So if you don't want to be a Christian, no one is making you. So if you want to live a homosexual lifestyle or be trans or whatever, then no one's making you be a Christian. No Christians are doing turn or burn. They're not converting by the sword. You don't have to be a Christian. But if you want to be a Christian, then yes, it does require that you die to self and follow Christian teachings. So to the Christian, I want you to, now I'm going to talk to you all Christians out there. Now, yeah, many you can tell with my tone that this stuff drives me nuts, but there is actually a very real thing. I know homosexual people. I know people with same-sex attraction. I know this stuff. And some of these people are really good people who are really struggling with a particular attraction that they never chose. Okay. Sometimes things happen to them in life that actually kind of cross those wires. see my interview on this channel with Vincent Blanchard, a missionary who, dealt with sexual abuse, intense sexual abuse as a kid, and he'll tell you a little bit about that experience of what that did to his attractions later on in life. Of course, he's married now and has kids and all that, and it's great, but still, it did not mess him up. So, especially if you were raised in the church and have followed historical Christianity all your life, you need to understand that there is a cost that you're asking people, though, who have exclusive same-sex attraction, especially. For many people, to change their view on sexuality is a great risk who are secular. I work with secular kids a lot, which means that I see what it's like when they're raised in and around this, and their friends are all this. They could lose their romantic relationship, obviously, if they commit to a Christian one, but they could also lose their sexual relationship, but they could also lose close friends and even family members simply for becoming Christian and holding to the Christian view. If the person was to sacrifice their entire community, would they be welcome in the new one? That's the question every Christian needs to ask themselves. If they forsake this community they're part of, will they be welcome in the new one, in the church? So would your church and with your friendships open themselves up to this person if they rejected all of everything for Jesus Christ? This person's view on sexuality is likely connected to this person's view, this hypothetical person's view is likely connected, all of it, to their community, the sexuality, to their community, and their very identity, which is why this is such a hot button topic for so many people. So even though the majority of Christians I know are not hateful towards those who are differing in their sexual ethic, know that it doesn't mean people, of course, haven't been hurt by the church. I mean, Westboro Baptist Church, we all know exists, right? So we do have to make sure that we have to acknowledge that sort of thing has done a lot of damage to Christian reputations. So do not attempt to force people into a Christian sexual ethic either. It's far more compelling when people come to their own convictions after being engaged honestly and lovingly. So I want us to make sure that we understand that before I get into the rest of this. So yeah, call it civil union. Fine. Marriage? Nope. Based. So one of the beauties of theology of the body is learning that Jesus came in a body, a sexual body, to redeem our bodies, including our sexuality. A freaking men. And I think it's also one of the best parts about him actually being not married and therefore celibate was the fact that he showed that you don't even have to give into your sexual desires. Because you cannot tell me that Jesus was a man who was 30 some odd years old, who went through puberty as a man and did not experience what the body would want to desire, right? So anyway, yeah, just like the Jesus revolution, we need to be ready to accept people who might make us uncomfortable and love on them. Exactly. So amen, Christina. I have a video making that. Oh, very good. So yes. So same-sex relationships are mentioned in at least 5 places in scripture. And I'm going to do a whole nother video where I address all the progressive arguments on this stuff. But Leviticus 18:22, Leviticus 20:13, Romans 1:26-27, 1 Corinthians 6:9, and 1 Timothy 1:9-10. Many sins are listed among homosexuality, so it's important that we acknowledge that there are other sins, okay, that are mentioned with it. So sometimes Christians want to focus only on this and not on the other ones, which is where the problem comes. So same-sex relationships are always mentioned with a slew of other sins. These passages, though, aren't intended to be a cudgel against same-sex relationships, but rather to stand against all sin and ungodliness of people in general. So remember, it's condemning all those sins. So if you're going to be mad at people for the same-sex thing, we got to make sure that, well, am I falling into those other ones? But also, I don't think most Christians would be offended if someone pulled out and was like, nope, you're committing that sin. It's right here. It's listed amongst these other sins. And you'd go, okay, yeah, at least you should. But what the writers are doing, though, is condemning all sin equally, is showing our need for God, the law, and Jesus Christ. That's what they're doing. All this is bad. That's why we need the redemption of Jesus, that he redeemed our bodies and redeemed our sexuality. So whatever homosexual relations are mentioned in the Bible, they are always prohibited. And this is why it drives me nuts when I hear the progressive arguments nowadays. I'm like, no, the church not only has historically always taught this, but every single time any same-sex relationship is brought up in the Bible, it is absolutely condemned. So therefore, it's not think about the chance of, even if their whole interpretation of pederasty and all that is true, what are the chances that that's actually what's happening here when it's mentioned in all from Old and New Testaments? It's always considered bad. Come on now. So it's important to note most every verse in the Bible is debated in scholarship. So before someone's like, well, this is under debate. Yeah, okay, so does everything else. That doesn't mean all parts are of the debate are equally viable. Like, I'm sorry, most every New Testament scholar will tell you straight up that these people who are trying to twist the Greek and stuff are full of it. It doesn't make sense. It's not within the cultural confines. It doesn't make sense linguistically, all that. We also notice, as we talked about marriage, it never said anything about being same-sex attracted. It never mentions that. So people often cannot control what they're attracted to. They can only control how they act on that attraction, right? Nobody wakes up and going, you know what? I'm going to be attracted to that today. Not usually how that works. Most people don't choose their attractions. I always joke around that I'm going to get canceled one day. I always joke around that I have yellow fever because my wife is Korean and my wife cracks jokes like that too toward me. We have a very open conversation jokes about our interracial relationship all the time. Okay. So hold on here. All right. But I've always been attracted to, and I had a type. I was always either attracted to like pale brunettes or Asian women. It's just what I was. That's what I was attracted to. Does that mean that I woke up and chose that? No, not really. So that means same-sex attracted people, like they exist, and I don't think a lot of them woke up and chose to be attracted to that. There's a difference between attraction, though, being attracted to the thing, and then acting out on the thing. So anyway, so even though it doesn't say anything about same-sex attracted people, it does always condemn the same-sex acts. So people often, again, cannot control what they're attracted to. They can only control how they act upon it. Someone's same-sex attraction isn't ruining God's plan for merely existing, right? So what matters is how they exist in this world when they have that, just like every other temptation on the planet. A man, you might be attracted to, 20 women in a day, but it doesn't mean you get to act out on that attraction to 20 women in a day, right? So as we discussed, God's design for sex is sexual opposites engaged in marriage. Biological difference is a key component, not particular sexual attractions. Actually, you'll notice that it says they just become one flesh. It doesn't, it says that, he does look at her and stuff, but you'll notice a lot of times it's not always that's the focal point there. Pale brunettes for the win. They're biased. That's what your wife is anyway. So at this point, all of Christianity has been canceled, whatever the heck that means. Amen to that. So now what's the significance of Judaism and Christianity always being agreed on the same-sex conversation? Is because all throughout Scripture, we have diversity of teaching, okay? Throughout Scripture, many topics are approached with a certain amount of nuance and tension in the Bible, creating a diverse kaleidoscope kind of regarding them, right? So we have divorce. Divorce is a great example. Ezra 9 through 10 commands divorce. Deuteronomy 24 is pretty loose on divorce. Matthew 5 and Mark 10 teaches Jesus teaches divorce is wrong, but it was only tolerated due to the hardness of hearts. Malachi 2 says God hates divorce. Paul discusses abandonment, unbelieving spouses, etc. The only thing is there's a diversity of teachings in Scripture that we can kind of pull together and create a web of tension and kind of figure out how to parse it all out. Killing is another great example. The Bible tells us we should not kill, but also issues war and death penalties throughout. Thus, as one wrestles with these tensions and diversity, resulting in Christian pacifists and also Christians just war proponents, right? Alcohol is another great example. Throughout the Bible, it warns of alcohol's bite, its drunkenness. But then in Deuteronomy and Proverbs 31, it commands its use. So this has resulted in teetotalers and Christians who believe that alcoholism is a sin, and others who believe drunkenness as a whole is a sin, right? You have a diversity of views. Women in leadership is another example. Throughout the Bible, we see people like Ruth who take a more humble and passive approach, and those like Deborah who are more overt. We see Lydia and Joanna being deaconesses in the church, while also the disciples being 12 men, pastors described as a one-woman man, right? Or Paul forbidding women to teach, Junia being an apostle. 1 Corinthians 11 assumes women can be prophets, but in 1 Timothy 2:12 and 1 Corinthians 14, it seems that women shouldn't exercise authority over a man. If you take nearly every doctrine in that we talk about in Christianity, you're going to read these texts, you're going to hear a bunch of different approaches to them, and then you're going to run into like different ways this gets parsed out by Christians. Try to wrestle with the text and come up to reasonable conclusions. However, when it comes to the topic of sexual sin, the Bible is extremely clear. Adultery is a sin. Fornication is a sin. Incest is a sin. Same-sex relationships is a sin. Marriage always belongs to one man and one woman. Sexual difference is key. Is united in that. There is no diversity of views on it. The closest you're going to get to diversity of views is polygamy. But even then, many people have pointed out the issues there. So if you go historical with the Christian church and what we think, if you want to be sure that you're not reading your own thoughts into a text, it's always good to look back into history and see how many people have held your view. Because obviously, if no one else has ever held your view before ever in your life, chances of you being right are probably less likely, right? If we're just being honest. If you look around the globe now and you see the majority of churches believe a certain thing across all various cultures, you should probably consider where you line up with those, right? If you get a Catholic and Methodist and all those people across all the denominations across the entire world together, and they all agree, yep, this is what we've always taught, it's going to be pretty impressive. It probably means that's pretty much close to right? It's like doing a crowdsourcing a little bit there. So it could be like, this is a bandwagon fallacy, but it's not when you're just using general wisdom principles of like, am I the odd one out here? I wonder if there's a reason for that. What am I missing? So consider Christians across the globe and throughout history rarely agree on everything. But historical views of marriage have always been that the church has varied within the framework of traditional marriage, but has always affirmed that there is the traditional marriage model, right? Some early church fathers had a negative view of marriage, thinking it distracted one's view of the gospel, for example. Tatian, Tertullian, Jerome are some examples of that. Some believe sexual differences would go away even in the Great Resurrection, like Clement of Alexandria, Origen, or Gregory of Nyssa. However, some had a very high view of marriage as a life-giving institution, like Augustine, Jovinian, Aquinas, Luther, Calvin, Barth. So they all agreed, though, that sexual difference was a key part. So no matter how they parsed all that out, sexual difference is a key part. So the historical view of same-sex unions. So the early church had to keep dealing with same-sex unions. By the way, that's what's funny when they're like, well, the Bible, this word actually means blah, blah, blah. So this really just, I think it's referring to the power dynamics and pederasty and all that. The early church actually had to keep dealing with this. They had to deal with same-sex unions actually frequently, because guess what? The church was during the time of Roman occupation. They're around Romans, man, and Romans be gay, okay? There's a lot of gayness going on there. So in the Council of Ancyra, I think is how you say it, in 314 AD, it discussed the penance of how would one undergo penance if he engaged in such behavior. In the constitutions of the Holy Apostles in 375 AD, it expressed sexual difference was important for marriage and same-sex unions were forbidden. There were pretentials written to priests on how to deal with confession of same-sex relationships, including men with boys, men with men, and women with women. And this was around 500 and 900 AD. These varied in how they were dealt with as far as punishment was concerned, and depending on the person's position in the church, and if it was a single offense versus habitual, etc. There was a different ways on how they dealt with it as a sin, but they all agreed it was a sin. Because of sexual immorality all across Europe, this brought Peter Damian to even write a book called the Book of Gomorrah, which was all about condemning the practice. So, sex marriage. So as we talk about this way, I believe the government being the sugar daddy is wanting to not pay for so many mouths to feed. Enter abortion for the quick way to lessen the bleed. Oof, yikes. Yeah, that's so true. So in other words, the church has always agreed this is a sin. Therefore, you saying that, oh, no, it can be okay. If you're saying that, you're the odd one out here. When all the councils and everyone have always agreed, when you get the Eastern Orthodox, the Protestants, and the Catholics together in a room and they all agree and look at you and call you the heretic, then you're probably the heretic, man. I'm just saying. So sex and marriage, sex/marriage is not essential for human happiness. This is what's important here. So, okay, I'm going to address their arguments later in a different video. The arguments used to twist the Bible to mean that. I'm going to do that probably next week. But when we understand historically it's always been a sin because it's not a reflection of God's perfect design. It's not a reflection of proper covenant. It's not a reflection of masculine and feminine, of the opposing opposites being together. It's not that. However, then once I've had this, people like, so these people are supposed to be miserable all their life, they're not supposed to be happy, they're not supposed to flourish. Here's the thing: sex and marriage, sex or marriage, so it's important to understand that, is not essential for human happiness. It's not. The church celebrates marriage. And this is why the comment earlier is not true. The church celebrates marriage, but it doesn't necessitate it. The Bible never promises a spouse, nor does it promise that you'll be sexually satisfied. This whole idea of a soulmate is not in the Bible. It's just not. That God's going to orchestrate your one person. He's got one person for you, and he's going to find that's not in the Bible. In the Bible, marriage is a possibility, not a promise. It's a vocation for a certain group of people. It's not just a promise, and it's not. Sorry, I messed that up. It's a vocation for a certain group of people, but it's not a promise that you're going to have, and it's certainly not a requirement. So that's one of the issues that we forget, that marriage is a vocation. So it's a thing that you do. It's like your job in a sense, where it's like, okay, now that I have this job, this is my vocation. These are the duties that come along with it. Hence, having children, treating your spouse properly, loving them, and all those things. And why you're faithful to them, and why you don't divorce them. So although it's important to know, again, though, that marriage is the institutional foundation to all human society, it doesn't mean that it's required. It doesn't mean that it's a promise and all that stuff. Okay. So, as mentioned before, Jesus was a single man of marital age, yet never married. Jesus was the perfect culmination of humanity with the divine, man with God and God with man. The only perfect and complete human being to walk the earth was, by the way, single. Keep that in mind. Jesus even elevates eunuchs, right, who are single people, to the same state as married people. Notice that in Matthew 19. He says, the disciple said to him, if such is the case of a man with his wife, it is better to not marry. But he said to them, not everyone can receive this saying, but only those to whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made so by men, and there are eunuchs who have been made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let the one who is able to receive this receive it. So, right there, some were born eunuchs, so some were born with some sort of deformity. Some were made eunuchs by men, which is what they did in the Roman Empire, that they would remove men's, testicles and stuff to make sure that they weren't a sexual threat into the king's courts and stuff. Or there's some who made eunuchs for the kingdom of God. In other words, they're celibate and they commit themselves to the work of God. So remember, your body's a gift, and you can give it to a spouse, or you can give it to God. Being married is a gift, but being single is a gift too, because life is a gift and your body is a gift, and how you use that body for God or for others is a gift. So singleness isn't bad. So in other words, if you are a same-sex attracted person, you're a same-sex attracted person, and you're like, I can't be attracted to the opposite sex. I wish I could, but I literally can't. I've tried. I tried to pray the gay way, it didn't work. Okay, then that means you're called to celibacy. You're not to act out on your sexual desires. You're called to celibacy, and that's really hard for you to probably hear. It's probably hard for a lot of people to hear, but it is true. But in 1 Corinthians 7:38, it says, so then he who marries his betrothed does well, and he who refrains from marriage will do even better. So in the context here is giving everything to the Lord and no other distractions or responsibilities. So contrary to popular belief, the New Testament doesn't downplay marriage, but rather it vindicates singlehood by elevating it to a divine purpose, just as traditional marriage has a divine purpose. Because back then, what was valued was economically getting married, having lots of kids. That was a very good thing. And so he takes singleness and he actually elevates it also to a divine purpose. Both have divine purposes. So both are equally valid and both are equally valued before God. But we don't get to just sit there and try to tell God that he needs to rewrite his design or rewrite his laws. No, it's not his job to conform to your sin. It's your job to conform to his holiness. The Bible does not teach singleness is a curse either. It doesn't teach that it's something to despise. It doesn't say that it's a trudge to get through. It says it's a blessing which enables us to focus on the kingdom of God with no other responsibilities. If someone goes their entire life never having sex, never experiencing physical intimacy in any way, no promise of the gospel of the kingdom has actually been broken. No one has lived a less fulfilling or less promised life that God promised them if they choose to, if they live a life like that. Having a relationship with Jesus is more important than having experienced sexual intimacy. Our culture is highly sexualized, though, which has reverse influence the church into convincing Christians that the only way to be fulfilled and happy is to have sex, and more sex with more people we think are sexy, right? Like that's what we think: more sex, more sex, more sex. No, that's also not true. Preston Sprinkle said this: a robust understanding of Christian marriage includes the recognition that neither sex nor marriage is essential for human flourishing. Oh yeah, this clip is Angel talking about this exact thing in Jubilee's Middle Ground. Yeah, that was from a couple years ago, but that's exactly what he's talking about. Almost certainly symbolic. Jews loved using numbers for symbolic purposes. 12, 12, 12. Oh, you're asking something from over here. Oh yeah, the soulmate thing makes me cringe so much. Ugh, yeah, same. So regardless, though, having a relationship with Jesus is more valuable than with a romantic partner. It is. You're going to have a greater amount of fulfillment. The new creation is going to be so much greater than anything we experience here. He makes that very clear. So if you're experiencing that, I understand sexual brokenness is probably it's a difficult thing. I think all of us have experienced some form of sexual brokenness, myself not excluded, and it's hard. And that looks different for everyone. But when that's happening, you need to learn to, hey man, I got to give this to God. I got to give it to Jesus. I can't live it out. I can't be this way. And whatever he has for me in the new creation is greater than anything I'm going to have here. And that's a good thing. So, ooh. Oh, okay. I see. Recently stepped away from, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I heard somebody, now that you mentioned dispensational, now I'm stay yellow, my fellow. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Yeah, I am saying yellow, your fellow. Anyway, so yeah, that's what I want to talk about a little. That's also what I want to talk about today. Next time we'll be talking about, I'm going to be debunking every single argument that progressives make. And I'm going to be using a lot of notes from Preston Sprinkle. I'm going to be using a lot of notes that I've done in my own study and I've used over the years. And we're going to do that. We're going to destroy it. So, it's based on my 144,000 virgins comment, Will. I didn't see it. Oh, really off topic. Do you believe in the 144,000 virgins mentioned in Revelation are symbolic or literal? No need to answer if this is too off topic. No, I'm okay with that. Eschatological. That is, it's symbolic. I'm with Nathan here. It's the numbers are symbolic for 12 times 12 times 1,000, a highly symbolic number. Yeah, if you get into that, I mean, you're talking like 12 tribes of Israel, 12 disciples, all those things. You multiply it by that. It's basically going like really, 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 really. So the disciples time, like this is kind of my view. You have the disciples, you kind of multiply it by the tribes of Israel, and then you explode it across the virgins being just a symbol of like chaste and for God, like basically like saving themselves for one. And then you have this great symbolism of God's people, disciples, Israel, exploding across, committed to God. Christina, a great book I would recommend for you, which is not one I didn't read until recently after I read a lot of other stupidly academic books, and this book was very helpful for me. It's by Scott McKnight. It's called Revelation for the Rest of Us. Read it, and then read the other one, which is Reading Revelation Responsibly. They'll help you out. That one's by Michael Gorman. So anyway. Oh, the only book that I read of his was the 21 same-sex conversations or something like that. But he had his podcast is really good too. I've done a lot of his center. He's like the leader of the Center of Faith and Sexuality or whatever, and listened to a lot of his trainings there. And yeah, it's really good. Like he's got really good trainings on this stuff, and he starts off with like humanizing them. He doesn't see the LGBTQ movement, or people, I should say. He doesn't see the people as enemies. He sees them as people. Now I might have come off a little bit more hostile there, where I'm talking about like redefining marriage, but for real though, it's because I'm passionate about it. It really irritates me that we keep allowing people to redefine stuff. It's like, no, you don't get to redefine stuff. This isn't real. That's not real. That's not real marriage. and I don't need to acknowledge it as a real marriage. It's not forcing me to do it. So it's like the pronoun thing. No, that's not really what you are. I don't have to do that. I do not have to deny reality to fit within your fantasy. I don't have to do that. We shouldn't expect people to do that. You can have whatever fantasy you want. You can have whatever beliefs you want, but we should not be conforming that, because then we're buying into a lie and we're only reinforcing a lie. However, I do think that we need to understand that people with same-sex attraction, that's not something that they want. They never desired that. And a lot of people even hate that about themselves. A lot of people know intrinsically in their heart that it's wrong. Like, they know from God that because they're creating this image, that is wrong. So there's a lot of shame that gets involved with it. I think we should accept them and love them. We need to be willing to hear somebody say, like, hey, I struggle with this, and not ostracize them and think that they're worse off. Like, we have the same thing could be said with people who have, like someone comes out and says, oh, pornography addiction. We're like, oh man, we'll come beside you. But sometimes, I can see it, like, especially with students, like boys. If a boy walks in, I have pornography addiction, all the boys like, yeah, we're all fighting lust. Then if a boy walks in, like, I struggle with lust toward other boys, all the boys just like disappear and don't want to support their brother and bear his burden. And it's a real shame. Because all we're doing is we're encouraging people to act out then on their same-sex attractions, and that the church isn't going to be the community that accepts them. So we need to accept them, take them as part of us, and that if they're going to ostracize this community over here that's going to encourage them to live in their sin, then we need to accept them over here and encourage them into holiness. And the solution is never to reinforce the sin. And that means the same thing with pornography. That means the same thing with men who want to hook up with other women, all those things. It's like all that, like that we should never reinforce the sin. We should always reinforce holiness. And that's the thing too. That's why Jesus became man, to redeem our bodies. That's what he did. And to redeem our sexuality and to challenge us to reflect his desired creative purpose for marriage and for sexuality. All those things. That's what it all does. So anyway, does anyone have any other questions real quick? I don't think so. We have a small group tonight because we're not talking about the atonement or anything zesty. So I'm just going to type this in here for you, Christina. Revelation for the Rest of Us. That book's amazing. And then you also have reading Revelation responsibly. Oh my gosh, I can't even type. Oh, good. You added both of them to your Amazon cart. Sweet. I think McKnight's book is better to start with, and then Gorman's is like going to be more more like general and thorough, but McKnight's is going to help you actually understand it. So, what are my thoughts on the Catholic Church viewing marriage as a sacrament? I appreciate the importance they give it, but my intuition is that only baptism and communion are sacraments. Yeah, I'm not on board with the sacraments thing. Like, I wouldn't say I'm passionate about it. Like, if they want to call it that, I'm not like, oh, well, like, it's the end of the world. Like, okay, there could be worse things. But yeah, I don't see it as a sacrament. I look at it as an institution. I think it's a covenantal institution. And by the way, you're all welcome for oh, you're buying my book next. So okay, I won't complain. So I mean, yeah, it is funny to talk about all this stuff, like, sexuality, sex, marriage. There's a lot of jokes you can crack in there. I cracked so many jokes with the students. I made them so uncomfortable. It was glorious. Loved every second of it. Cherished it, really. One of the things I also have an issue with, and I said this in the previous episodes in the Theology of the Body series, which is like, I hate how we talk about sex in the church. Like, we whisper it. We act like it's shameful. We pretend like nobody enjoys it. Like, oh, you kids. And I'm up there. It's like, by the way, guys, we're going to talk about sex today. And I'm just going to let you guys know sex is awesome. They're like, oh, and I was like, oh no, it's awesome. I love sex. And they're like, oh, it's like saying that, like this, making the kids like, oh, get out of here. Like, it's so hilarious. But it's just because it's like, well, no, Christians should be like the most pro-sex people. Like, because we actually have the answer for it, which is Christian marriage. And that's where you get, your sexual drive out. 1 Corinthians 7, right there. Like, we should be very pro-sex. Like, shouldn't be ashamed about it. We should be very cool with it. God created it. It's good. He looked at it, said it was good. It says become one flesh. It says be fruitful and multiply. Let's do it. Like, it's a good thing. So yeah, I'm very big on all that. But anyhow, um, all right, guys. So Nathan read Ephesians 5. It's hard to deny that marriage is sacramental. I mean, yeah, I would say that there's definitely like that an aspect of like divinity. That's why I call it institution. I wouldn't call it a full on sacrament though, like the same level of merit of communion and baptism. But great mystery. The Latin is sacramentum, literally sacrament, a physical sign of spiritual mystery. Okay. All right, Psycho Bible, you might be convincing me. Yeah, maybe. I'll think about it. So Will said the sex word with teens. Good for you. Oh, I said it a lot. I actually had one kid who during the Theology about it series, the family pulled in one of the kids because it was just like, yeah, I was making the kid too uncomfortable. How I was like, okay, well, they're lost. We're over here laughing, having a good time. But it was actually funny because here's what's funny. I small group was so difficult for me to get the boys to open up about. So difficult. Start the Theology of the Body series, and suddenly the boys started opening up a lot more, not just about sexuality, but like body image issues and identity issues. And, you know, it was just really fascinating to see like this. Every generation craved it. I craved it. I wish I knew half this stuff when I was young, but I didn't. And therefore I had a very confused view of all of this stuff. However, so I did not tell him that, Paul. I don't think I did. I may have mentioned it in boys' small group. I may have mentioned that. Song of Solomon 2:3. Everyone, just go ahead and turn there. Let's see. Hold on. There you go. Have fun with that, y'all. But how was I going with that? Oh, but this generation especially more so than ever. My generation was bad. We were the ones like it was already coming downhill for us, but then it hit the generation after us like a ton of bricks. But like, it hit they need the theology of the body so bad, and they know it. So right when you start talking about it, they open up about it, and they're wrestling with it because they see it destroy. Like it's awful. They see what's happened when people destroy their bodies. They see what has happened in our culture today, and the kids are starting to see that the problems, and they're answering the call, which is super cool to see that there's interest there. Some modern translations aren't so bold with it. Yeah, dude, I really wish it's crude in Hebrew. Oh yeah, it is, dude. Everything's more crude in the Hebrew and the Greek, but especially Hebrew. Because here's what's funny: people don't realize this probably because if you're not familiar with Jewish theology, like I've done a lot of reading on Jewish literature, and the Jewish people, by the way, like especially like religiously, are not taboo about sex at all, at all. They talk about it pretty openly, flippantly, pretty crassly. They have no, which is what's funny. It's like, so if you crack a sex joke or whatever, someone in the church is going to be like, he says to stay away from crude jokes. I'm like, he's not talking about a sex joke there. He's talking about being crude toward one another, like bad joking about other people. He's not talking about like sex humor because that's all over the place also in the Bible. Anyway. Okay, guys. Well, this is Theology of the Body Part 5. The next one will be debunking all the progressive arguments for same-sex relationships. And then I might do a bout through 1 Corinthians 7. We'll see what ends up happening. But anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed this. All like 7 of you who actually care about the Theology of the Body series. But I really care about it. I'm passionate about it. And I don't care if anyone else, if the algorithm cops don't like it as much. I'm going to finish this series, and it'll be a playlist, and it will be a resource on my channel, and everyone can fight me on it. So, all right, guys, love you all. Take care. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ dwell with you all richly. I will see you all in the next one.